Um, we're going to record the whole thing. We might just put the first presentation part up on the OLOC website, but we're recording the whole thing because we really want to hear everyone's comments. And then for those of us who are putting together the collection that I'll describe to you in a moment, then we'll have those notes so that we can fold them in with our thoughts. So just to get started, I just want to let you know that our co-facilitators today are Katherine Wood from Colorado and Sally Tatnall from Cleveland. And we had hoped that Jackie Lewis Miller would have been here with us today, as well as Methia Little Smith, both of whom are sadly experiencing some health issues today, so they won't be joining us, but I want to call them here in spirit because they've been very helpful in terms of this whole process. And what process, you ask? Well, so just to give you a little bit of the backstory, I am a very big book collector, and I was cleaning off my shelves one day and I found this. Let me see if I can get it here so you can see, which is impossible to do. There we go. It's called Confronting Ageism, Facilitators Handbook for Confronting Ageism. And this was put out by members of OLOC back in 1992. And the subtitle is Consciousness Raising for Lesbians 60 and Older. So I was very intrigued by this and thought, you know, this is something that we could probably still use. But then as I was looking at it, was realizing that it's pretty outdated. And not very many people have, I don't know how many people even actually have copies of this thing. I think I might have one of the few extant print copies that are available. Deirdre has a copy and there might be a few others. But it has great historical value. And so we were trying to think about how we could update it and see where it goes from there. So, and because OLOC has so many priorities, it seems that one of the priorities that we lose track of sometimes is actually a conversation about aging and ageism and how do we understand ourselves as old lesbians. And if you don't like the word old, we're also trying to use words like elder or crone or sage, wise woman, grandmother, senior, foremother, and any other words like that. Witch, I don't know, maybe Halloween, I'm always using witch and reclaiming that word for myself. But anyway, we want to figure out ways to talk about how we can address the pervasive ageism that we are experiencing among ourselves in our own lesbian community and from the world out there at large. So with the blessings of the steering committee, we put together this little group, Katherine and me and Sally and Jackie and Methia, who have been working on trying to revamp this book. And we've been working on it since about March. And the reason we're doing that, we're hoping that this will be a tool that could be used for the chapters and the coordinators who want to have conversations with their chapter members, or any small group of lesbians who want to get together and talk about these issues, or anybody who's actively doing progressive work on ageism, and so on and so forth. So those are the tools for it. And in the one of the first things we did was to look at the chapters or the sections of the book. They're not really chapters, they're sections that have brief writing and some discussion questions to kind of get people percolating. It's not an answer book. It really is a facilitation for discussion type collection. So we just wanted to make that clear. It's not like you're going to be necessarily reading about ageism per se, but basically giving you some tools so that you can begin to think about it for yourself and among your communities, whoever it is that you're hanging out with. So in the chat, I've put the list of the table of contents that we have developed, and we keep changing it and moving it around. There may be some things that'll come and go, but basically claiming old, aging, and ageism, what's happening, thinking about identities and intersectionality, experiences of bias and oppression. When did that happen? Our body's growing old. Let's talk about sex, sexuality and sensuality. I'm not a medical issue, and that touches on issues of health and disability. Aging with reflective spirit, which we'll get into some thoughts around spirituality and those and how we are in the world at large. Dying with dignity, money, economic security, weaving new webs, which is about technologies and how we cope with them as old lesbians. Wise lesbian elders in community, embracing our power. Where do we go from here with continuing community and activism? And then we're trying to put together a detailed reading list to support all of these different topics, as well as anything else we might want to put in here. So we thought with today, we're kind of midway. Our goal is to have this project finished in early spring, so that it can be available to all the members of OLOC and anybody else who might want to have a download a version of it or use it for whatever purposes they want to use it for. And so we're sort of midway through the project. And so we thought we would introduce what we've been working on in terms of the first section, which is I Claim Old, Aging and Ageism. So we've divided it into 3 topics, and we will each take a topic to talk about. And then, so for example, the first one will be Sally, and she's going to talk about how we describe aging and ageism. And then Katherine and I will respond, and then we'll do that 2 more times with 2 other questions. And then we will open it all up to you for your thoughts and input. So while we're moving along, if you have ideas or things you want to chirp about, if you want to put those in the chat, we would be very grateful for that. And then we'll hopefully have a really great conversation when we're done with our first part. So Sally, take it away. How do we describe or recognize ageism? Unmute yourself.
I'd like to first say one change that we have already made is that OLOC, Old Lesbians Organizing for Change, has added a tagline, an international community of lesbian elders. So we want to express the ways that all of us experience aging and ageism. Ageism is like all other oppressions. It values some people over others and convinces us all that this valuing is correct or as a matter of fact. In the case of ageism, youth is valued over old. This leads old people to think less of themselves and try to be and look younger. Phrases like, oh, you don't look your age, or I'm 60 years young are common. When someone says, I feel old, it may only be about feeling tired or confused. When someone else says it to you, it is overt ageism. When we say it ourselves, it is internalized ageism. Many old women reject old because they say they don't feel old. This is probably because they do not feel like what our society says it is to be old. We are not feeble and out of touch. Ageism is everywhere. It is about rejecting the elder voice when we know the most. It is about denying our lived experience. It is focusing on anything that is youthful as the way to be. Being physically fit says you are staying young, rather than saying old people stay fit too. Young people do not own fitness. I have some quotes from Learning to be Old by Margaret Cruikshank. Activities beneficial to elders, exercise, games, group therapy, and telling life stories. And telling our stories, which some people label as old people, is critical to maintaining our lived experience. Holding up self-reliance as a gross generational ideal is singularly inappropriate. This reinforces the idea that the old should look after themselves. Their problems are their own and of no concern to the rest of us. The willingness to ask for help is a sign of emancipation from socially constructed aging. Fear of an aging population is viewed as a war, as facing the greatest onslaught, and are put forth by the white middle class, competitive male and Western mindset. The communal traditions of many Blacks, Latinos, Latinas, Asian Americans, and American Indians stress cooperation and harmony between generations rather than opposition and struggle. However, they are not the ones formulating aging policy. Ageism is so prevalent that no one gets past its power to make you feel bad at some point in your life. Age has nothing to do with how you feel about yourself or anything else. However, ageism allows others to determine how you feel and what you think. The word old is used to eliminate whatever you experience as reality. Given all of this, we as elders say, we will tell you what old really means. Old is exciting, is smart and creative. Old is gracious and passionate. Old is full of rich stories. Old is respected and respectful. It is generous, it is helpful. Old carries our past, even when the young try to eliminate it. Old understands and forgives. Old is lucky to still be here. And now each of our panel members will give their own example of ageism.
Katherine, you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Panina and Simi.
I love the list that Sally read at the end, and I'm going to try to focus on that as I age, because I sure have worked hard to get here. And I'd like to carry forward all that effort in positive ways that can set an example. I have a friend who, for years, has not wanted to turn 100. There's, for some reason in her mind, that's just a horrible thing. And just last week, she was diagnosed with a fast-growing pancreatic cancer. And she is so thrilled that she's not going to make it to her 100th birthday, which is in about 6 months. And of course, all of us who know her want her to stay. You know, we're all trying to convince her that 100 isn't bad. But as I watch her go toward death, she's doing it with such grace, such gratitude, and such excitement. And I am so grateful that she's a role model in my life, because I can only hope to approach my own demise in the same way. So I just love Sally's list. And I would love for us to be the change makers on how people approach aging and how they view ageism. Mev?
I was responding to what Sally was saying about old is bad and young is good, and that we value young as this positive thing. And my struggle with ageism is convincing people that I'm actually old, because first of all, I'm on the younger side of old. I'm 66 this year, so I still consider myself relatively young, but I also look younger than that. And I often have to spend time actually convincing people that I'm old, which means I have to convince myself that there's some value, you know, like, because I feel like what happens is that somebody says, oh, you're not old. And why do you say you're old? Like, that's so bad that you're saying you're old. I'm like, but I'm proud of my age, and I'm proud of my experiences, and I'm proud of the life I've lived. And I have some gray hairs, and I've really earned them. Thank you very much. So that's my struggle with some of this. But I've also really been thinking in terms of ageism. I do watch TV, and right now we are being bombarded with the Medicare re-enrollment, enrollment time commercials, and every time I see them, I just get so totally nauseous. First of all, to say what somebody was saying before about the healthcare system and how difficult it is, but I feel like they torment old people and they make it even worse. Like Medicare is one of the most horrific systems to try to navigate because there's so many plans and so many choices and so much of this and what's deductible and what's not, and it's a minefield. It's like, why do you spend so much time? Look, can't we just make it very simple and affordable? And that to me is the healthcare system to me is a really good example of systemic ageism in many ways, especially in the way the insurance companies work. And then the last thing I just wanted to say about ageism is our own experiences with technologies. We joke about it on the Zoom crew and on every Zoom that we have here at OLOC. And I have to first of all say I'm so proud of all the old lesbians at OLOC who have struggled with, embraced, and put up with, and really taken on all the things that we've been doing on Zoom, partly because I think it keeps us connected as a community, but also because it proves that old people can learn new tricks. And we have to, like, every 6 months, we have to relearn something new because they've changed something in the program and we have to relearn it all over again. But I just think that keeps us engaged, even when we don't want to be. I mean, I think that there's plenty of us who are like, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want a cell phone, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. And I think that's for our own self-preservation. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think it means that we're bad old people because we refuse to learn those technologies. But frankly, I know a lot of young people who are equally as baffled, if not more so, by some of the technologies that are out there. But I think that, I don't know how that fits into systemic ageism so much as it is to say, oh, you're old and feeble, and so you can't possibly learn how to do that. And I think that's obviously a big mistake. So that's all I wanted to say on that. So Sally?
I want to say, I know how it fits into ageism
Go
because we
ahead.
purposefully don't care if we can keep up.
Yeah,
They're on the move, period.
right. Stats, can you hold your question? Because we're just going to do the panel right now, and then we'll come back to thoughts and questions later. Thanks. So our second question is, what scares you about aging and ageism? What is it that we fear? Jackie was going to do this section, but since she's not here, Katherine has agreed to go ahead and start us off on that one.
So the word scare and the word fear, I think, are really important in this question. We're surrounded by stereotypes about what happens to people when they get to be certain ages. And that should scare us all shitless when we hear those things. We should all fear the stories that resound, the lack of respect that old people are shown. I mean, there's just so many things. For me personally, what scares me the most is not being heard. I grew up in a family with 3 brothers, and so often my comments were not important because I was just a girl. And I have really struggled for my voice in my family and in jobs. I mean, I think that's been one of my greatest lessons. And so as I age, I'm going to get smarter and smarter. I know me and I know my body. And when it comes time for making decisions or choices, I have everything written down that I could possibly get written down. But I'm just afraid that I won't be heard by other people. They might assume that, I've already lost my mind, or, that I really don't know what I'm talking about, or there are things that are better for me. So that's my greatest fear. And I've seriously thought about making little flashcards and putting like written in 2021, so people know that I was of sound mind. But, no, I don't want to do that, just so that I am heard. Then on the other hand, I'm also afraid of forgetting things. Because in our culture, anytime you forget something, oh, what was that word? Everybody's like, uh-oh, gotta watch. This could be dementia. So I've started a little notebook of dumb things that I've done and what age I was when I did them, so that I can go back and review my little book and go, oh yeah, I was 32 when I put toilet paper in the freezer because I wasn't focused. So, you know, I think that's good just to remind myself, because again, there are all kinds of scary things, you know, and when Mev was talking about Medicare, we all navigated Medicare. That to me is equivalent to a master's degree in college, if you can figure that out. So, you know, it's kind of ironic. But anyway, Sally, what are your thoughts around your fears? Oh, unmute.
I'm living one of my fears right now. I fear the surprises that are coming up. I never thought I would be in the situation I am in now at 84 years old. And the situation I'm referring to is helping to raise a 9-month-old, not on my plan. And it does take up energy and time. So, you know, it's just one of those. And I was talking with another woman the other day, and she said, I had no idea X would be where I am today. And so it's just, you know, what else is going to be around the corner, since I've already experienced a few surprises. The other thing I would talk about is how I'm seen as forgetting. You know, I have never, from college, I can remember turning to my college roommate to introduce her, and her name just wasn't there. I've just never really remembered names. So now when I don't remember a name, it's attributed to my age and forgetting. And it's like, my response to that is usually, no, I have a much bigger Rolodex than you do. It's just going to take me time to get to it. I mean, this idea, of course, they don't even know what Rolodex means, but I do. And then the third thing that I have concerns about, I don't, it is a fear, but it's more of a concern, and that's mobility. I have lots of reasons where I could be in a wheelchair, and I just, but it would mean me not attending to some things in my life. And I'd rather not be in a wheelchair, and not because I don't want to be in a wheelchair, but how people get treated when they show any kind of disability. They're ignored, erased, not relevant. I mean, there are just so many ways in which any visible disability gets responded to. So those things are mainly my areas of concern. Mev?
All of what you both said already. And I also want to add to that a couple of things. One is that I have long perceived myself as some kind of a political activist in some form or another, whether I started off doing anti-nuclear stuff or being involved in women's movement and LGBT movement and so on and so forth. And as I age, it's not really it's kind of more of a concern rather than a fear, but it is kind of a fear too, is that there's so much intersectionality now that I don't know if I can recognize for myself when I'm experiencing something that's based in ageism, or if it's because I'm a woman, or if it's because I'm a lesbian, or if it's because I'm fat, or all of the above. And that concerns me because I can't sort it out for myself. I'm not always sure I can sort it out for someone else. And I find that mostly true in medical situations, but also just, I mean, if I tell people if I had a quarter for all the times I was called sir, I'd be able to buy a house or something. I don't know. But, so I think that parceling all that out is something, and some days right now, when I get tired, I'm like, I don't care. Whatever the thing is of du jour today, the biggest conflict or whatever, it's like, I really want to care. And it scares me that I sometimes feel like I don't care, which is weird because but one thing I know I do care about, and that concerns me, is the disappearance of lesbians. And we all hear about the disappearing L, and the loss of our bookstores and our music and our cultures and our festivals and our spaces and all the things that our generation spent a lot of time building up and is now slowly diminishing. And if some of it has diminished completely and some of it is still, and so trying to regain that back if we can, or hold on to it. Or what scares me is that our stories are going to get lost. And so I encourage everybody to write down whatever little pieces of memory you have, what your stories are, whether you put it in a poem or an essay or a book or who cares, write it on index cards and put it in a shoebox and tell people not to throw it away, and make sure it gets handed to somebody who will treasure that so that we can keep our lesbian legacies. And then the other thing that is connected to ageism and what concerns me is housing stability. Am I going to be able to age in place? How long can I stay in my house? I watched my parents kick and carry on because we tried to get them to move into something. They lived in a 3-story house. My dad died in that 3-story house. He was 93 years old. Much as we wanted him to move into something that was a little bit more navigable for him, he refused to do it. And I get it now. I mean, I knew it then, but I get why we want to stay in our space. But what concerns me is, what scares me is that I won't be able to stay in my space, but even if I can stay in my space, what are the supports around me? I don't have kids. I don't have nearby relatives. I have whoever will help me, and I'm not sure who that is. And so I find that very scary. And concerning, and I got to get off my butt and do something about it, but I'm not even sure really what to do. So those are my concerns. So I will end it there, and then others can chirp in on that. And then the third question that we have is actually my own, so I will start off. So what are some of the strategies that we can use to address ageism? Either toward others or toward ourselves. What strategies do we have for challenging offensive language or situations? So to start that off, I would say that we need to take ourselves seriously. If we don't respect ourselves, if we don't take ourselves seriously, if we don't advocate for ourselves, then it's hard to know who else will. And so I think for many of us, that takes a certain kind of courage, especially as we get old. We may be feeling not as certain, or we may be feeling tired, or we may, feel like crotchety old gals who just, really are demanding our space and wanting to be, as Katherine said, seen and heard, but having the respect and care for ourselves to really do that. Claim what our purpose is, even if your purpose is to grow sunflowers, just having something in our lives that gives us meaning, or gives us a way to say, you know what, I'm still here, I'm still living, I still have a lot I can contribute and give, and I demand that space, and I demand to be heard. I think that for me is one way that we can, and don't be apologetic about it. Oh, I'm sorry, but no, don't apologize. Be done with apologizing. Just claim it and say, you know what, I'm grouchy today, and you're just going to have to deal with it. I was grouchy when I was 23. I was really rip-roaring angry when I was 23. You know, you wouldn't want to know me when I was 23, and I'm glad I'm 66 now. You know, I feel like there's a way that aging process, like I look back on it and I'm like, who the heck was that miserable so-and-so when she was 33 years old? Like, what was going on there? And I'm glad I'm past that now, you know. So I think there's a lot of gratefulness I have. And maybe that's one of the things that we can do. The other thing is to find your community, whoever it is, to have a sense of support. So that you can gain some strength and perspective. Like if you say, well, did that really happen? And have 2 or 3 others who could say to you, yeah, that really sucked. You know, like you're not crazy, that really happened. And you know, so that you're feeling that kind of support and community. And then the other thing is in terms of offensive language, I mean, we see it every day. And I find that for myself, I'm not always so quick to identify it. I try to, but I sometimes like 3 hours later, I'll be like, oh, doink, I should have said something in response to whatever that was that person said. Sometimes the lag time is a little too long for my own taste. But I would say that if, you know, to really call out when people are using old or fat or dyke or woman or cunt or whatever those things are in pejorative ways, to really call it out and say, wait a minute, stop. Why did you say that? What was your meaning behind that? What did you hope to gain by doing that? Were you doing that to put me down or to put yourself down, or what was the point behind that? And really just to call it out and say, you know what, maybe we need to think about some other ways to phrase that statement, whatever it was in which those words were being used in a negative connotation. Because the words themselves, I've had this argument with people, especially around the word fat. I use fat. I am fat. I am proud of being fat. I'm okay with it. Don't bother me about it. And it's not a negative word. It's just a word. And it's all the junk that society has put on top of that that makes us feel bad about it, whether it's old or dyke or whatever that word is. We need to reclaim some of those words and say, you know, the words by themselves are just words. And how we hear them and how we use them is what makes the difference. So I think I'm going to stop there with my strategies. Sally, what are yours?
I ask for help. I love the thing that Margaret said about asking for help as a sign of emancipation from socially constructed aging. You know, I ask for help, and I'll tell you, I see it as inviting somebody to, you know, giving somebody an opportunity to participate in the social network we're both part of. And, you know, it gives people feel good when they help. So I'm just giving them opportunities to feel good about themselves. I mean, how bad could that be, you know? So I do ask for help, and I really encourage people, you know, falling into that myth of self-made whatever that our culture, you know, demands is wrong and hurtful and goes against the social animal that we all are. So please ask for help. The other thing I was going to say is health advocacy. You know, I want to remind people that it was the feminist movement in the 70s that said, don't go to the doctor alone, take a friend, don't be out of, what do I want to say, out of information just because you're having an emotional response to something the doctor's just told you. You know, having a health advocate, someone who goes with you, someone who will be there to explain to you when you know, when you feel terrorized. I think that this, again, it's this alone thing. We're supposed to do all this shit alone. No, that's not who we are. That's not who we are genetically. That's not who we are biologically. We are a social being. And to put ourselves in isolation is really not a good idea and does not further us as a community. So those two things are really my basic strategies. Katherine?
Yeah, I love that, because after spending all like a year and a half, however long it was, totally by myself in my house with no human contact other than Zoom, no physical contact, I decided that I was over that I was going to have a life that was vibrant and full of people. And that's still not completely possible, but whenever it can be, I try to let that happen, because we aren't, I mean, if I learned anything from COVID, and trust me, I learned a lot. I learned what a social being I am and how important it is for me to have people in my life. So I totally agree with that. I mentioned a couple strategies already. One is keeping my little humor book about weird things that I've done, and what age I was when I did them, just so I can remember it's not weird that I pushed the gas pedal instead of the brake. I did that one time when I ran into the back of someone, you know, and I was 43, so that I can just remember that these things aren't unusual for me. I try to keep a sense of humor about things. And, you know, I just spend a lot of time laughing, not at myself, but with myself. We just, our OLOC chapter just had our annual retreat, and I was the youngest one there by 20 years. So we would decide that we were going to go somewhere, and we would all try to get up out of our chairs at the same time. And, you know, I just had to laugh because it took me as long to get up as it did somebody in their 90s. And I came home and I thought, okay, that's it. I want to be able to get out of chairs. I need to go to physical therapy. So I started PT, and I was already enrolled in a balance class. I'm trying to do things to prepare myself for later on so that I can make sure that I can do them. I love to walk. So I've been trying to make myself walk more. I got a Fitbit so that I can track it. So I'm just kind of looking at what kind of life do I want to have? And then how do I go about creating that now so that it can continue? So Mev, back to you.
Thank you all. And I love that idea of having a sense of humor too. I mean, I think, you know, we can be very serious about many things, but having always that sense of humor, being able to laugh at ourselves is comforting sometimes. Oh yeah. So right now what we want to do then is to pretty much, I see a few things going on in the chat, which is great. Thank you very much. We want to now hear from all of you. You can either ask a question of one of us or respond to something that you heard. Again, the three questions that we were focusing on with the trying to really focus on ageism is: how do we describe or recognize ageism? What scares you about aging or ageism? And what are some of the strategies that you have or know about in terms of